He married me for my name, my empire, and my access to power. What he forgot. I built it all. So when I found out he forged deals with his mistress behind my back, I didn't cry. I froze his accounts, auctioned off his ego, and made sure the whole world knew who really ran Wolf Holdings. He came for my legacy. I buried his. 1 week before our anniversary, I found the second phone. It was tucked behind Adrian's cufflink box, half hidden, uncharged, and flat black with no case. Something about it immediately felt wrong. My husband was meticulous, the kind of man who lined up his pens and polished his shoes before bed. He wouldn't leave a spare phone out of place. Still, I might have ignored it, if it hadn't buzzed. Just once. A low vibration, brief and ominous, like a quiet warning. I stared at it for a long moment, then reached out, palms cold. I told myself it was probably work. Maybe a backup. Maybe he'd borrowed someone else's in a rush. I didn't want to look. Adrian and I had built a life on mutual trust, hadn't we? No questions, no snooping. He said he loved my independence. I let him keep his privacy. But my gut twisted, tight and unmistakable. I pressed the side button. The lock screen blinked to life. No Face ID. Just a simple 4-digit passcode. I didn't think. My fingers moved on their own. 1 to 9, 8 to 6. His mother's birth year. The code he used when he was too tired to remember the others. The phone unlocked. My mouth went dry. It opened directly to a text thread. A name I didn't expect. One I knew too well. Isabella Reese. Her photo was cropped just beneath the name, glossy brunette waves, sharp cheekbones, a smirk like she knew something you didn't. She was a developer, rival, competitor, once almost a family ally. We'd sat on opposite sides of hotel acquisitions more times than I could count. I'd said no to her firm's bid on Wolf's East Marina project 6 months ago. Now I was looking at her name on my husband's hidden phone. The most recent message was from last night. Isabella, 1 more week and the clause lifts. Then we get what we came for. I booked dinner at La Mer, our usual. Don't be late. I stared. Read it again. Clause. My pulse kicked. The prenuptial clause. The one that stated Adrian would gain access to shared trust assets, including my Wolf Holdings shares, only after 2 full years of marriage. We were just 1 week shy of our first anniversary. My chest tightened. I scrolled up. Adrian, she still doesn't suspect a thing. Just smiles and signs. God, she makes it so easy. Isabella, of course she does. You married her for the name. The rest is fluff. Adrian, and the penthouse. And the private jet. And the marina deal. All of which become mine when the clause expires. Isabella, we're so close. Don't get sentimental now. Adrian, she thinks I love her. Hell, I almost convinced myself. I stopped breathing. The air in the room was thin, hot, wrong. My knees hit the edge of the bed and I sat down slowly, carefully, as if the floor might vanish beneath me. He married me, for this? The Wolf name. The shares. The deals. He hadn't just lied. He had planned this, down to the timing, the prenup, the meetings I'd trusted him to attend on my behalf. I was a strategy. A ladder. And he'd climbed it perfectly. I should have screamed. Should have thrown something. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the phone, my fingers trembling. Not because of heartbreak. Because of clarity. The memory of our wedding flashed across my mind. Snow falling over Lake Como. My ivory Dior gown. My father giving me away with a tight smile, whispering, "If he ever hurts you, I'll destroy him." Adrian had kissed my hands and promised forever. I'd believed him. God, I'd really believed him. No. Now I was staring at a conversation that reduced me to nothing but leverage. I set the phone down, folded my hands in my lap, and stared at the woman in the mirror across the room. I didn't recognize her. Not the soft waves of her hair. Not the robe of pale gold silk he'd gifted me last Christmas. Not the woman who'd spent months believing she was building something real. Her eyes were sharp, pulled, moving. I rose, walked barefoot to the mirror and studied her closely. She looked like someone who'd just been handed a truth too big to ignore. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. My real phone, the one Adrian didn't know I'd encrypted since the day he proposed. Evie Santos, board docs ready for signature. Let me know if you need language revised before the shareholder vote. I stared at it, then replied simply, "Hold. I need to review some things. My hands were steady now. My voice would be too. But not tonight. Tonight I wouldn't say a word. Not to Evie. Not to Adrian. Not even to my father, who would no doubt burn the city down if he knew. I would let him sleep beside me like nothing had changed. Let him plan our anniversary dinner. Let him believe I was still the naive wife who didn't read the fine print. Let him think the clock was still ticking in his favor. Later that night, Adrian's side of the bed. He came in late, smelling of expensive whiskey and power meetings. Loosened tie, flushed cheeks, fake fatigue. "Sorry I missed dinner, love," he mumbled, kissing my temple. "Investors called a surprise round table." I smiled faintly. "It's all right. I saved you some risotto." He didn't notice the silence under my words, or the way I didn't reach for his hand. He just slid into bed beside me, wrapped an arm around my waist and whispered, "Can't wait to celebrate next week. 1 year already. We made it." Made it? He had no idea the countdown just reset. But not toward the life he planned. Toward the one I'd build alone. 5 days before the anniversary. The click of my heels echoed across the Wolf Holdings executive floor like a countdown clock. Sharp, steady, unstoppable. I arrived before the building even filled with light. Before the executive assistants brewed their first round of coffee or the morning meeting reminders flooded inboxes. Only one person was waiting when I stepped off the elevator. Evie Santos, my general counsel, and the only woman in New York whose poker face could rival mine. She took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. "Boardroom," she said, holding open the glass door. I nodded. "Bring your clean phone." The Wolf Holdings war room was designed for crisis. Soundproof walls. Frosted glass. Direct line to our offshore counsel in Zurich. And this morning, it was the place where I would quietly begin removing Adrian Grant from every corner of my empire. Evie pulled out her legal tablet, already open to a confidential client shell profile. "I assume this is about him," she said, tapping the file labeled AG Asset Audit. I didn't reply. She glanced at me. "I'm not asking how you found out. I'm asking how loud you want this." My fingers curled around the back of the leather chair. "Silent. For now. But thorough. I want every contract he's touched in the last year reviewed. Every meeting he's attended, every NDA he's signed." Evie's jaw tightened. "You think he's been moving against you?" "I know it," I said flatly. "Start with the East Marina file. Cross-reference it against Reese Group's public filings." She tilted the tablet toward me. "Already ahead of you." A spreadsheet appeared. There, in plain black ink, was a line item labeled Future Joint Use Agreement with Wolf Expansion Division Phase 3 Marina Rights. Dated 3 months ago. Hidden inside a vague quarterly investor report from Isabella Reese's firm. 3 months. Oh. The rage returned, not hot, not wild. Just cold, surgical. He hadn't slipped. He hadn't fumbled. He'd been feeding her information for months. While I was in Tokyo finalizing the Kyoto boutique launch. While I was in London with my father, pitching the new Midtown flagship. While I was waking up beside him thinking we were building something real. "Pull the internal approvals," I said. "I want to see which names greenlit the draft contracts." Evie's fingers flew over the screen. Within seconds, 3 names popped up. The first 2 were Wolf Jr. executives. The third? Adrian Grant, Wolf Expansion Strategy Advisor. My stomach flipped. "He signed it under a temporary advisory role?" Evie nodded grimly. "You approved that access 6 months ago when he offered to ease your workload on the expansion portfolio." I remembered that meeting. I'd been jet-lagged from Hong Kong, drowning in back-to-back market analysis calls. Adrian had walked into my office with 2 cappuccinos, kissed my forehead and said, "Let me take this one. You've earned a break." I'd laughed. Grateful. Grateful. My lips curled into a mirthless smile. "Pull everything tied to that advisory pass. I want to know what else he touched." Evie nodded. "And the prenup clause?" "We don't wait for the 2-year mark. We freeze access now." Quietly. "No. Legally." Evie raised an eyebrow. "He'll know." "Let him," I said. "Let him wonder." The room was locked. No assistants. No observers. Just me, Evie, and Leonard Huxley, our CFO and the man who'd taught me how to balance a $200 million quarterly projection at age 25. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the printouts. Adrian's been slowly shifting funds from the shared marital account into two external business portfolios. One is shielded under an LLC registered in Nevada. The other is tied to a Reese Shell Corp in the Caymans. He paused. He's using Wolf funds to buy equity in her expansion. Evie exhaled. Unbelievable. Is it? I murmured. They looked at me. I was standing perfectly still, watching the numbers bleed across the screen. $150,000 withdrawn from the joint account the week I signed over the yacht transfer papers. Another $230,000 during my Lisbon trip. This wasn't casual betrayal. This was strategic fraud. I turned to Huxley. Initiate marital asset lockdown. Freeze joint accounts. Reverse any unsecured Wolf disbursements tied to Adrian Grant. Flag his access to our internal servers. He hesitated. That will alert him. I smiled thinly. Then we'll give him a distraction. When Adrian walked through the front door, he found me curled up on the couch in cashmere, sipping wine, a script open on my tablet. He paused, blinking. You're home early. Felt like a quiet night, I said, smiling faintly. Besides, we need to finalize anniversary dinner. I was thinking Amalfi this year. His face lit up. God, I love that. I stood, walked to him, kissed his cheek like nothing had changed. Good. I'll call the villa tomorrow. He slipped his arm around my waist. You okay? You've been quiet this week. I looked up at him, so handsome, so confident. The man who had watched me sign over contracts he'd secretly amended. The man who had laid beside me, whispering promises, while plotting takeover with another woman. I'm just tired, I said gently. But I'm happy. And I saw it, the relief in his eyes. The belief that I was still his. Still blind. He kissed me again, longer this time. You're amazing, you know that? I didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. But I didn't close my eyes either. I kept them wide open. My private login hummed to life. Line by line, the legal team uploaded flagged contracts and amendments Adrian had manipulated. Reese Group was listed on 4 strategic files, each buried beneath innocuous language. If I hadn't read them line by line, I might have missed it. But I didn't miss things anymore. Not now. Evie sent one final message before logging off. We're ready when you are. Just say the word. I stared at the cursor blinking on the screen. Then typed. Not yet. Let the lies keep building. The fall will be better. The invitation list had gone out under Adrian's name. That part was easy to orchestrate. He loved the spotlight too much to resist. A Wolf winter benefit at the Midtown Glass House, benefiting children's education funds, attended by every major investor, journalist, and hotelier in our orbit. What Adrian didn't know was that I had swapped the event planning team. What Adrian didn't know was that the media kits had been updated. What Adrian didn't know was that tonight his performance as Mr. Wolf would have consequences. I stood before my mirror, fastening the final clasp of my diamond cuff. The gown I wore was sleek, navy silk that shimmered like water. Nothing sentimental, nothing bridal. My hair was parted sharp, swept back, no curls, no softness. I didn't want to look like a woman in love tonight. I wanted to look like a weapon. The venue shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers and floor-length windows. Musicians played soft strings while champagne flowed like currency. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd, and beneath the marble arch bearing the Wolf crest, 200 guests mingled, laughed, networked. Adrian worked the room like a veteran politician, smiling, shaking hands, whispering investment promises. Everyone wanted a piece of him. But his eyes kept flicking to the entrance. He was waiting for her. And sure enough, she arrived. Isabella Reese, dressed in blood-red silk, hair coiled like a serpent crown, eyes scanning the room like she already owned it. When she spotted Adrian, her smile curled with unearned confidence. I watched them from the mezzanine above, sipping champagne unseen. Let them perform. Let them pose. Let them pretend the trap wasn't already closing. The lights dimmed slightly, and the crowd was ushered toward the glass stage where Wolf Holdings was expected to announce its next global initiative. Adrian stood confidently near the podium. Isabella found a seat near the front, next to a Wolf board member who had no idea the woman was plotting to infiltrate the company's assets. On the table before Adrian sat the media folders, hand-bound, gold embossed. He didn't know they'd been replaced. He didn't know that inside each one was the truth. I took my place beside him at the podium just as the MC introduced us. Please welcome the Executive Chair of Wolf Holdings, Sienna Wolf Grant, and her husband, Adrian Grant, Head of Wolf Expansion Strategy. Applause followed. Cameras flashed. Investors leaned in. Adrian stepped up first. Thank you all for being here. We're proud to unveil the newest Wolf International Waterfront development, Project Horizon. He gestured to the screens. This initiative, long in planning, will represent a historic partnership between Wolf Holdings and Reese Group International. There was the moment. The crowd murmured in surprise. Heads turned. Adrian opened the press packet, expecting the glowing joint summary he and Isabella had written. What he found instead was a full audit. Screens behind him lit up with high-resolution slides. A comparison between the real Wolf zoning agreement and the forged one. A financial breakdown showing unauthorized transfers from Wolf to a Reese Shell Corporation. Time-stamped emails between Adrian and Isabella. And finally, a blown-up version of the prenuptial clause, highlighted in red, clearly showing the date the clause would expire. 1 week from tonight. The crowd gasped. And Adrian's face went white. At first he tried to laugh. This is a mistake. These aren't the real. But the murmurs turned into whispers. Phones were already out. Journalists snapping photos. Wolf board members reading the documents they held in trembling hands. Isabella stood slowly from her seat, her lips pressed in fury. What the hell is this? She hissed across the aisle. I didn't look at her. I stepped forward to the microphone. There will be no partnership between Wolf Holdings and Reese Group, I said calmly. Any documents signed in relation to Project Horizon by unauthorized parties are null, and legal counsel has already been retained to enforce that nullification. The room fell silent. My gaze swept over the crowd, then landed, very deliberately, on Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, I said softly, for helping us uncover a breach before any real damage could be done. Gasps again. He stepped toward me, eyes wild. Sienna, we can talk about this. You don't have to. I turned away from the microphone and said only loud enough for him to hear, you should sit down before you fall down. Within 5 minutes, Wolf Holdings' head of PR was fielding live calls. The glass house floor split into pockets. Some investors whispering to one another, others already leaving, reporters scrambling outside to file stories. Adrian stood alone, abandoned, stunned. Isabella had vanished. I slipped into the private holding room off the back corridor, where the event team kept backup notes and spare champagne. Evie was already there, smiling faintly. You really want to go for quiet, Sienna? I raised an eyebrow. You just detonated a live scandal in a room full of investors and press. I didn't raise my voice, I said. I never said he committed fraud. I merely stated that unauthorized documents existed. He'll have to explain the rest. Evie laughed. And the prenup clause slide? Was a public record, I said simply. We clinked glasses. Her phone buzzed. He checked it. Media's already labeling it the Ice Bride reveal. How poetic. Adrian waited by the valet entrance. His tie was gone, his jacket slung over one shoulder. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 hours ago. He stepped in front of me as I exited. Sienna, please. It was just supposed to be temporary. I was going to come clean after the anniversary. I didn't stop walking. Did you love her? I asked flatly. He hesitated. It wasn't about love. It was business. You know how this works. I nodded once. Yes, I do. The car door opened. I got in and left him standing in the street. The moment I entered, the city beyond the windows was glowing like fire. I walked to my desk, took out a notebook and turned to a fresh page. Across the top I wrote, "What he touched," and began listing every Wolf division Adrian had had access to over the past 18 months. I wouldn't rush. The trap had only started. And I wasn't done yet. The Grant family had always wanted a legacy, but they chose the wrong woman to manipulate. I stood in front of their townhouse on the Upper East Side, a limestone monument to borrowed prestige. Adrian's father had once joked that marrying into the Wolf family was the smartest investment their bloodline had ever made. Now I was here to terminate that investment. The doorman, dressed in stiff navy, recognized me immediately. Mrs. Wolfe Grant, he stammered. They're expecting you, Mr. and Mrs. Grant, in the solarium. Of course they were. I hadn't warned them. But they knew something was coming. Everyone in New York did after last night's gala. Eleanor Grant looked like she hadn't slept. Still in her pearls and cream Chanel cardigan, seated rigidly beside her husband. Charles Grant, always the more composed of the two, rose when I entered, offering a handshake that I ignored. I'm not here for pleasantries, I said. Eleanor's voice trembled with manufactured calm. We were so shocked by last night. Surely there's been some mistake. There wasn't. I took the armchair across from them and placed a leather folder on the glass table between us. Inside were 5 documents. The forged Wolf-Reese partnership amendment. Adrian's messages to Isabella. A printout of his offshore transactions. The prenup clause. And a final memo from Wolf Holdings Board. Formal severance of ties, Adrian Grant. Charles flipped through the documents with shaking hands. Eleanor didn't even look. You humiliated him. In public. I revealed the truth. Publicly, I said. You could have handled it privately, she snapped. You've always been so calculated. Adrian made mistakes, yes, but mistakes. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Your son weaponized my name. Forged company documents. Funneled Wolf Holdings funds to a competitor through his mistress. He didn't just cheat on me, he committed fraud. Charles cleared his throat. Sienna, let's not throw words around that can't be taken back. I looked at him evenly. You mean legal words? Because they've already been sent to counsel. The room chilled. I came here today out of respect for your name, I continued. You raised your son to chase power. He found it in me. But he lost it the moment he forgot who built the empire he tried to steal. Eleanor looked away. Charles finally set the folder down. So, what do you want from us? Nothing, I said. I'm here to give you something instead. He frowned. And that is clarity. I opened my purse and retrieved a second envelope, this one marked with the Wolf family crest. This is a formal letter of withdrawal, I said. Effective immediately, the Wolf family severs all financial, social, and charitable affiliations with the Grant name. No invitations. No endorsements. No shared accounts. My mother is removing Eleanor from the Ladies' Foundation board today. Eleanor flinched. You wouldn't. She already has. I turned to Charles. The Grant name will no longer be used in Wolf expansion campaigns. Your son will not inherit a single Wolf-tied asset, nor will he sit on any board. You're lobbying for inclusion in the Wolf family trust. Done. He stared at me stunned. I added one final nail. Your Manhattan Tower project? We'll be recalling our backing. Quietly but immediately. Charles's knuckles went white against the chair. That project is half built. If the Wolf funds disappear, it'll collapse. I suggest you liquidate what you can. The silence stretched. Eleanor whispered. He loved you, you know. No, I said, rising. He loved proximity to power. He just forgot that proximity isn't possession. At the door I paused. For what it's worth. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this to protect what my grandfather built. You should have raised a man with integrity. And then I left. Evie met me at the elevators with a grin. That went fast. They had nothing to say worth hearing. She held up her phone. Media outlets are scrambling. Everyone's calling it Wolf's social execution. Adrian's name is trending. Reese Group shares are tanking. I nodded. Good. Also, Wolf Sr. approved your request. The trust amendment signed. Adrian's name is out. Permanently. I exhaled slowly. The thing about family power is that it doesn't need noise to move mountains. It just needs certainty. Not the penthouse. Not the glass tower Adrian once called our palace. This loft was mine, bought in my 20s before I ever let anyone believe they'd share my future. I stood by the tall windows watching the city stretch before me, my hands resting lightly on the stone counter. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. Proud of you. And don't worry. The board is fully behind you. Beneath it, a second message, this one from a blocked number. You didn't have to go after my parents. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then typed. They were collateral in your strategy. You should have remembered who signed the original checks. No reply came. Subject line, grant access revoked. Updated guest list spring ball. I smiled, deleted it and opened a new tab. The page loaded. Nominees for Forbes Women in Power, under 40. I read my name. Not as Wolf Grant. Just Sienna Wolf. As it always should have been. Isabella Reese thrived on power built from proximity. Proximity to men like Adrian, to titles like Wolf, to secrets that weren't hers to hold. She was beautiful, brilliant, and until 48 hours ago respected. Her firm, Reese Group International, had been climbing fast in the world of urban luxury redevelopment. But fast climbs are brittle. And I was about to hand her the fall. Everything's in place? I asked without looking up from the tablet. Evie Santos gave a curt nod. Reese Group's primary investors received the whistleblower packet at 7 a.m. Anonymous source, of course. And the contents? She flipped the screen toward me. Email threads. Bank transfer receipts. Metadata linking Isabella to Adrian's forged zoning deal. Highlighted clauses showing she stood to gain equity in a Wolf Holdings asset not open for outside acquisition. I skimmed the page. It was damning. Every number traceable. Every file legally obtained through Adrian's former Wolf access. Now repurposed to show Isabella's role. Evie continued, we've scheduled your press statement for 2 p.m. neutral language. Just enough to suggest Wolf Holdings is re-evaluating future collaborations with any firm under SEC review. Perfect, I said. On the other side of the city, Isabella stood in a steel and glass boardroom, facing 12 furious men and women. News had broken on Bloomberg 30 minutes ago. Reese Group linked to Wolf Holdings insider scandal. SEC sources confirm preliminary review. Her voice, though sharp, cracked as she tried to explain. This is a misunderstanding. My communications with Mr. Grant were strictly personal. Wolf Holdings was never at risk. One of the investors interrupted, cold. You dated the man who had joint access to sensitive zoning data, and we're to believe this didn't influence your pipeline? I never asked him to. But you benefited, another investor snapped. We lost $100 million in projected Wolf expansion profits this morning because the market now believes we're radioactive. Isabella's face paled. Reese Group was just nominated for the Midtown Harbor bid, she offered weakly. A third investor pushed a printed headline across the table. Wolf family formally cuts Reese Group from Harbor shortlist. It was dated that morning. Isabella sat down hard. The sun filtered through tall windows as I signed off on the final page of a press memo. Across the top, official notice of partnership termination. It would hit the wires within the hour. Evie slid a second phone onto my desk. She's been calling every board member she knows. Then she tried your father. What did he say? Tell her to ask the man who fed her crumbs how it feels to starve. I almost smiled. Almost. No cameras. Just a typed statement. Delivered to the press in soft copy. No interviews. No emotion. Just a confirmation. Wolf Holdings has no active or future projects tied to Reese Group International. We remain committed to ethical, transparent growth. Internal compliance teams are cooperating with all regulatory bodies. The media didn't need more. They filled in the rest. She returned home to find 2 men in suits waiting. Not security. Not lawyers. Clients. Withdrawal notice, one of them said. We're pulling our backing from your next 3 developments. Effective immediately. You can't, she gasped. You're a PR nightmare now, the other said. And we can't afford you. She stood there, frozen as the elevator doors shut in her face. The sun had dipped below the skyline. I stood at the window sipping a glass of Burlo when my phone buzzed. A message. Unsaved number. Isabella Reese. You win. I hope it was worth it. Can we talk? I stared at the screen. A part of me wanted to reply. To write out the pages of betrayal. The lies. The months of playing dumb while she manipulated me from behind a screen. But I didn't need that now. Instead I typed back 2 words. We're done. Blocked the number. And went back to my wine. The courtroom smelled of stale wood polish and fragile egos. Adrian sat at the plaintiff's table, jaw tight, flanked by 2 men in over-tailored suits who looked like they'd lost sleep the entire week. Which they had. He wore a navy 3-piece, hair perfectly combed, hands clasped like he was praying. Probably was. But not to win. To survive. 2 weeks after the gala collapse and Isabella's public fall from grace, Adrian had filed a civil suit. Grant versus Wolf Holdings and Sienna Wolf. For defamation, breach of marital contract and reputational damages. It was a desperate move. A Hail Mary. A PR stunt masked as legal strategy. He claimed I had intentionally sabotaged his name in a vindictive crusade, that my exposé at the gala had caused irreparable career harm. His lawyers attached press clippings, photos of him looking disheveled at JFK, and even a doctor's note stating he was experiencing acute stress. Adrian always did know how to play the victim. Unfortunately for him, I never showed up empty-handed. My heels didn't echo when I entered. They landed like statements. I wore black. Not mourning. Not modesty. Power. My legal team followed behind me. Evie Santos in her signature crimson lip and calm steel posture, and Arthur Mays, our litigation bulldog who once made a biotexio cry on the stand. Adrian's eyes flicked to me. I didn't look back. The clerk called us to order. Plaintiff, Mr. Adrian Grant. Defendant, Ms. Sienna Wolf. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp features and a reputation for not tolerating theatrics. I liked her immediately. She adjusted her glasses. Let's begin. Adrian's lead attorney, a man named Reese Mallory, launched into his act. Mr. Grant's reputation has been decimated. Once a respected figure in real estate, he is now unemployable due to false and malicious accusations. The public humiliation orchestrated by Ms. Wolf was calculated, excessive, and designed to destroy. I didn't flinch. He paused for effect, then added, and let the record show that Mr. Grant was never formally charged with misconduct. All allegations remain speculative. I watched Adrian nod as if vindicated. Then it was our turn. Arthur stood slowly. Your Honor, we will present irrefutable evidence, not speculation, showing the plaintiff engaged in forgery, financial fraud, and breach of fiduciary duties during his time embedded in Wolf Holdings operations. And that Ms. Wolf acted in accordance with her legal rights to protect a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. He paused. This case isn't about damage. It's about exposure. And Mr. Grant fears the consequences of what we're about to show. First, Adrian's forged contract addendum. Evie placed 2 documents side by side under the projection screen. One original zoning agreement and one that had mysteriously surfaced in Reese Group files. Identical except for one line. Evie circled the unauthorized edition in red. Arthur spoke. Metadata analysis shows this edit was made from Mr. Grant's laptop on April 14, 3:43 a.m. He attempted to backdate the PDF. Unfortunately, he forgot about server sync logs. The judge leaned forward. Next, screenshots. Adrian texting Isabella. She signs everything without reading. It's a gift. Another, just hold tight. In 2 weeks I'll have full access to the trust. Then, transaction records. $150,000 moved from the Wolf Grant marital account into a Shell LLC, later traced to a Reese Group holding company. Why would Mr. Grant use a Cayman-based shell to fund a competitor of his wife's company? Arthur asked. Adrian's lawyer objected. Overruled, said the judge. Proceed. By the time we reached the surveillance logs, showing Adrian accessing Wolf documents with Isabella's login while I was in Tokyo, his team began to crumble. They requested a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. Outside the courtroom, Adrian cornered me for the first time in weeks. You didn't have to go this far, he said, voice shaking. I didn't go far enough, I replied. But the law did. His eyes were glassy. They'll bury me. I tilted my head. You already did that yourself. I just showed them the grave. Back inside. When the recess ended, Adrian's legal team didn't continue their defense. Instead, Reese Mallory stood and said, Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, the plaintiff would like to withdraw his defamation claim. The courtroom murmured. Judge Leone nodded. Motion to dismiss granted. Records will show the suit was dropped after submission of material evidence. Then she turned to Adrian. And Mr. Grant, I would advise you to consult criminal counsel before initiating any further civil action. If this evidence is submitted to the Attorney General's office, you may find yourself facing more than embarrassment. Adrian didn't reply. Reporters swarmed. Ms. Wolf, any comment? I simply looked into the camera. Then said, Wolf Holdings protects its legacy. No exceptions. That was it. No threats. No tears. No rage. Just fact. The city shimmered below. Evie poured 2 glasses of wine. You were a force. I smiled faintly. He thought a courtroom was a stage. He forgot it was a record. She raised her glass. To records that last forever. And we drank. The penthouse was silent, bathed in golden afternoon light that spilled across the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the skyline blinked like the city didn't know a war had been fought inside these walls. But I did. This place had been a battleground dressed in polished marble and champagne flutes. Every lie Adrian whispered had echoed from these walls. Every moment he texted her while kissing me goodnight had lived in this space. Today it became mine again. Or rather, it stopped being his. We're set, Ms. Wolf, the locksmith said, standing near the new digital panel beside the front door. U code. Biometric ID wiped. No duplicates. Good, I said. He handed me the access fob. Only you now. I nodded once, then turned to the last task, checking the bedroom. Everything Adrian had left behind was boxed, neatly, respectfully. 3 tailored suits, 1 stack of cufflinks, a drawer's worth of cologne, and a bottle of that overpriced whiskey he loved more than monogamy. They sat on the entry table like sad trophies. The building's concierge would deliver them to his temp address. One of his family's brownstones, I assumed. They still let him in. I heard the elevator before I saw him. His keycard didn't work. Of course it didn't. There was a series of increasingly frantic beeps. Then a loud knock. Sienna. What the hell? I didn't answer right away. He knocked again, harder. Sienna, open the door. I let it ring through the silence for 5 more seconds. Then I unlocked it. He stormed in before I could step aside fully. You changed the locks? Yes, I said calm. Your name was removed from the deed this morning. You can't do that. I already did. He stopped in the middle of the living room, turning to look around. Boxes. Empty closet shelves. A single set of keys on the island. Mine. His voice dropped, hoarse. You cleared everything. No, I said. I kept everything. You came in with nothing. You leave with nothing. He paced near the fireplace, hands shoved in his pockets. I thought we could talk. I thought we'd at least get a moment after everything. I stared at him. You sued me. You forged contracts under my company. You drained our joint assets into a competitor's fund while sleeping with the woman trying to dismantle my family's legacy. What moment exactly were you hoping for? He didn't respond. Instead, he looked at the coffee table where the framed photo of our wedding once stood. It wasn't supposed to end like this, he muttered. I said nothing. You loved me once, he tried. I loved who I thought you were, I corrected. But you weren't that man. His voice rose, desperate now. So that's it? You just shut me out of everything. No, I said. You did that. I just locked the door behind you. He walked toward the front door, then hesitated. Turn back. You've become cold, he said. I tilted my head. No. I've become precise. Isabella was wrong, he added quietly. She thought you'd melt down. Instead you turned into this. Woman who doesn't burn her house down, I finished. She rebuilds it. Without the rot. He stared at me. Hollow. Rage, shame, disbelief. A cocktail of everything he never thought he'd feel. I don't have anywhere to go, he whispered. You have everywhere you deserve, I replied. And then I stepped past him and opened the door. The hallway was quiet. The elevator blinked at the end. Goodbye, Adrian. He didn't move. I pressed the call button. When the elevator arrived, I turned once more. I hope one day you learn the difference between owning something and being allowed near it. The doors closed between us. I poured a glass of wine, barefoot, hair loose, music playing softly from my speakers. No shadows in the corners. No secrets tucked in drawers. Only space. And quiet. And mine. The gallery was white-walled and hushed, with the kind of reverent silence usually reserved for fine art or funerals. In this case it was both. A funeral for his taste. A gallery for his vanity. Adrian's watches, 12 of them, all vintage, all obscenely expensive, sat in a row under individual glass cases. His sapphire Patek Philippe gleamed in the center. To its right, the platinum Rolex Daytona he wore when he proposed. Beyond the watches stood his cufflinks. Bespoke. Hand-engraved. Gold bars pretending to be taste. A lucite plaque read. Private collection. Auctioned by anonymous benefactor. Proceeds to Women-Led Startups Initiative. I didn't need them to know my name. They already knew. The room filled quickly. Discreet wealth, sharp suits, a few press badges flashing discreetly behind velvet ropes. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is this really her doing? They say it was all his stuff. I heard she found out about the mistress and dropped him cold. Classy move, honestly. I remained upstairs in the private lounge overlooking the auction floor, sipping espresso, hair slicked into a low bun. Evie sat beside me scrolling headlines. Wolf widow liquidates ex's assets for female founders. Revenge has a price tag and she's selling it all. Guess who's not getting the Porsche? I arched an eyebrow. The Porsche went? For $420,000. Some West Coast tech guy. I smiled. Adrian had once called that car a symbol of the empire we were building. Turns out the only thing it built was a donation receipt. The last item, a framed oil portrait of Adrian that he'd commissioned himself. He said it made the penthouse look like a legacy estate. I thought it made it look like a shrine to narcissism. It sold for $6,000 to a woman who whispered she planned to paint over it. Total funds raised, $2.47 million. All wired, before close of business, to the She Rises initiative, a venture fund for minority-owned women-led startups. The press team had full coverage ready. I never issued a statement. Didn't need to. The headlines spoke for themselves. Adrian's former broker approached me cautiously. Ms. Wolf, if I may say, it's refreshing to see someone handle this with such restraint. I met his eyes. It wasn't restraint. He blinked. It was intention. And then I left. The walls echoed louder now. Clean. The space that had once housed his suits, his whiskey, his secrets, bare. I walked through the rooms one last time. No grief. No sadness. Just stillness. This wasn't where I'd rebuild. It was where I stopped carrying the weight. At the center of the living room I stood for a moment, then pulled out a slip of paper. Read. Transfer of ownership filed. Penthouse to be listed. I folded it. Left it on the kitchen island. As I walked to the door I glanced back only once. Then I turned off the lights. And locked the door behind me. Brick walls. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Plants I actually watered myself. My space. My name. My breath finally steady. On the coffee table a bouquet arrived. White ranunculus and eucalyptus. No card. Evie raised an eyebrow. Secret admirer? Maybe, I murmured. Or maybe just someone who saw what it looked like to burn quietly. The villa perched on the edge of Lake Como, all glass walls and quiet luxury. Inside, the Global Hospitality and Innovation Summit pulsed with money, charm, and ambition. Exactly my kind of room. But this time I wasn't here to negotiate a merger. I was here to speak. The banner at the front read, Keynote Speaker, Sienna Wolf, Wolf Holdings. No hyphen. No inherited title. Just me. My heels tapped softly as I walked onto the stage, a sleek navy jumpsuit replacing the corporate dresses I used to wear like armor. I didn't need armor anymore. The audience, executives, investors, designers, waited for me to speak. I didn't use a teleprompter. Legacy, I began, isn't what you leave behind when you're gone. It's what you protect while you're still standing. The applause after was warm, not thunderous. Not performative. Just real. And that was all I wanted. The sun shimmered on the surface of the lake as servers glided between marble tables with prosecco and espresso. I stepped aside, found a quiet table by the edge. And that's when I saw him. Roman Blackwell. British. Founder of the Blackwell Collective, one of the most respected boutique hotel groups in Europe. Rumored to have turned down partnerships with 3 Fortune 500 companies because he didn't like the vibe. We'd met once, briefly, at a Dubai gala years ago. I remembered the way he had asked about my ideas, not Adrian's. Now he walked toward me, not in a hurry, not with presumption. Just ease. Hey, he asked, gesturing to the seat across from me. I nodded. He sat, folded his hands and looked at me, not the logo on my badge, not the gossip in the press. Just me. Impressive keynote, he said casually. Clear. Grounded. No fluff. That's the goal, I replied. You speak like someone who has nothing left to prove, he observed. I don't. He smiled at that. Refreshing. Somehow, without planning it, we ended up walking through the garden paths that curved above the lake. There was no flirting. No performance. Just conversation. He asked about my vision for sustainable hospitality in urban spaces. I asked why he refused to franchise. He said, because scale without soul is just glass and steel. I stopped walking. That's a good line. He looked at me, serious now. You've had a hell of a year. I nodded. Any regrets? None, I said. Except maybe not doing it all sooner. He smiled again. You're not angry. No, I replied. Just done. The sun dipped low, brushing gold across the lake. Roman leaned beside me on the balcony railing. You know, he said, most people in our world, when they fall, they come back bitter. Or worse, invisible. And me? I asked. You came back better. I looked at him fully then. There was no pressure in his gaze. No rush. No need. Just interest. Possibility. And respect. Whatever this is, I said softly, I don't need saving. He nodded. Good. I've never been interested in saving anyone. But I admire those who saved themselves. I smiled slow and easy. Then looked back out at the water. I stood at the window barefoot, wine in hand. My phone buzzed. A headline. Wolf Holdings announces global mentorship program for women in hospitality. Under it, a photo of me, laughing mid-sentence, hair in the wind. Not posed. Not rehearsed. I saved it. Then set the phone down. And turned toward the lake, letting the breeze move through the open glass doors. I had walked through fire. Now I stood on the other side, made of something stronger. Not revenge. Not rage. Just clarity. The wind tugged at the sheer curtains as I stepped out onto the balcony. Roman joined me a few moments later, offering a glass of water instead of more wine. We stood in silence for a moment, both watching the stars. Finally, he said, So, what's next? I turned to him. Whatever I choose, I said. And only on my terms. He nodded. And we watched the lake below shimmer, quiet, powerful, untouched. Just like me. The end.